We went to bodegas in Washington Heights, then came over here to the Bronx. Less money coming in, employees not showing up are some of the things that we heard. But for others, President Trump's immigration crackdown means bringing law and order.
So with President Trump's immigration crackdowns underway, certain areas of town are a lot quieter than they used to be, with local store owners revealing a notable decrease in the amount of customers they're seeing, while saying some of their employees are scared they could be spotted by ICE and deported if they come to work. However, New York is not the only city in America where immigration activity is creating ghost towns, and it certainly might not be the last.
Promises made, promises kept, with President Trump taking immediate action on his top campaign focus, fighting illegal immigration. And as ICE closes in on migrants, once vibrant neighborhoods are now turning into ghost towns.
Suslin Pichardo, who manages a Bronx bodega, says fewer undocumented workers are showing up for their shifts and significantly less foot traffic. She calls it the 2025 pandemic, but this time an immigration pandemic.
There's a lot of criminals. Now streets is more safe. You can see, you can walk now.
Yeah, they be afraid. They be calling me and asking, Frank, are they gonna come to the store?
A lot of fear, says this man from Ecuador. It's the kind of fear humanitarians are pushing back on, especially those who wish to protect the sanctuary sentiment.
But the reality is 65% of Americans strongly support deporting immigrants convicted of violent crimes.
Some bodega owners are looking to hire employees, in this case documented employees, because they need to keep moving the economy.
Why can't I make any changes without an admin approval? Why?
With Monday.com's
So immigration crackdowns are causing mainstream political panic, with some suggesting they'll lead to a smoothie shortage. But what nobody in the open borders crowd wants you to remember is that 4 years ago, before the largest migration event in U.S. history, we had a reasonably well-functioning country, which was a lot safer. Because it wasn't a hiding place for gang members and dangerous individuals, the very people Homeland Security is now after, with mass raids taking place in sanctuary cities all across the country. But these raids are turning certain New York neighborhoods into ghost towns, with business owners and residents saying the streets feel much quieter. But that brings up some uncomfortable questions and possibilities, like where did people living in the country without the right to work earn all of the money they were spending at these businesses? Were they earning money in a manner connected to the criminal underground by committing crimes, shoplifting, reselling stolen goods, or worse? And those businesses, by complaining to the news that immigration raids have scared away their employees, they've just admitted to illegally hiring and employing people who can't legally work and may be in the country without permission. Which brings us to the real reason why certain parts of New York are turning into ghost towns by allowing over 400,000 people to live in this city without permission to be in the U.S. An entire economic system has been created, which is illegal and exploits everyone who's part of it. In fact, I spoke to one restaurant worker who said their boss was hiring newly arrived asylum seekers off the books for far below minimum wage so they could save money. On top of that, if you walk down the streets of our working class neighborhoods, you'll see unlicensed street vendors all over the place, some of whom sell products that still have the price tags on them from the stores they were stolen from, which get handed to them in suitcases by a group of men, making you wonder if some of the people spreading out items on blankets are there by choice or not. But as you're about to see, even though immigration raids are putting an end to an illegal system of exploitation, predatory businesses and immigration advocates are very upset about it for some reason.
That makes no sense at all. If you don't think that they're being taken advantage of, like, come on, dude. I mean, I get it. They're not all like violent, but I mean, you know, it's against the law.
So here we have your local bodegas, convenience stores, coffee shops, and restaurants. And in some parts of New York, businesses like these now complain that they've got staffing problems and customer problems at the exact same time. And they say it's because of a prevailing sense of fear in immigrant communities over recent Homeland Security activity. But if what these businesses say is true, and both the customers and employees at some of these places aren't supposed to be here, who exactly is benefiting from a system that is in violation of federal immigration law?
We went to bodegas in Washington Heights, then came over here to the Bronx. Less money coming in, employees not showing up are some of the things that we heard. But for Johan Mencias, ICE raids are already making a positive impact in our neighborhoods.
I know there's a lot of good people too, you know, and I feel bad for them, but you know, but it's gotta be done. We gotta clean up. You know, I got 2 daughters. I want my daughter.
Wow, so as it turns out, the residents of this neighborhood do not benefit from businesses who break the law and hire people who aren't supposed to be in the country. And they're saying their neighborhoods now feel a lot safer because of these recent immigration crackdowns. But even though residents seem to be happy now, local businesses that were hiring these folks are not. But the crazy thing about that is by hiring people who don't have a right to work and paying them less than fair wages, those workers are being exploited, and so is the local neighborhood, which now has less jobs available for its residents. And how do we know that these businesses hiring people with no legal right to be in the country aren't holding that status over them or using it to coerce them to come into work in the first place, possibly as leverage to get them to work in unsafe, unsanitary conditions or do things they wouldn't otherwise? But there's another problem, because in New York you've got over 400,000 people who don't have a legal right to remain in America, yet because this is a sanctuary city, they're allowed to do that, but they've got to get by somehow. They've got to work, they've got to buy food, clothing, provide for themselves. And they can only do this if groups are willing to help them break the law, and some of those groups are gangs. And one of these gangs, this Tren de Aragua from Venezuela, they've had a bunch of high-profile members taken down recently. But this is a gang that made its way to New York during the asylum crisis, where it's been growing its criminal reach by exploiting people who may have entered the country but can't live or work here in a legal manner, and now find themselves needing the help of criminals to get things like fake IDs or fake working papers, which they could be using to trick legitimate businesses into hiring them, revealing that even if companies don't knowingly hire people who aren't supposed to be here, they could still be forced to shut down if they do, which apparently might happen to some small businesses in certain parts of New York.
There's a lot of criminals. Now the streets is more safe. You can see, you can walk.
Suslin Pichardo, who manages a Bronx bodega, says fewer undocumented workers are showing up for their shifts and significantly less foot traffic. She calls it the 2025 pandemic, but this time an immigration pandemic.
So the manager of this one bodega in the Bronx says that this crackdown has turned New York City into what it was in 2020 when the streets were completely empty and desolate. That's quite a statement. But it also reveals that most of...
No, you're paying them pennies to work for you, and now you're mad that they're not spending those pennies in your store. Come on, man. You don't care. You're just not benefiting anymore. That's the issue.
The business at her store was due to illegal activity, both on the part of the employees and the customers. And it also means that her store might not be able to stay open if that illegal activity disappears. Now look, I'm a business owner myself, and a store shutting down is never something anybody should be excited about. But if you've got a business and all of the people working there aren't supposed to be in the country and neither are the customers, who exactly is benefiting from that business other than the owners? And how are all of these customers who don't have legal work authorization able to afford the things in the store? They had to have been getting their money from somewhere, and these places are tiny. They can't employ 400,000 people, which means some of the business these stores were getting is related to criminal activity in other parts of the city. And there's no way around that. If somebody does not have legal work permission, the only way to get a job is to do it in an illegal way. And in some cases, that involves more than just working off the books. It involves shoplifting, which is a big problem in New York because retail theft has been decriminalized, and there are markets all over town where people were just reselling stuff on the sides of the street. On top of that, you've got restaurants full of health code violations renting themselves out to people to just use. And apparently you've got people making food and selling it all over town, totally under the radar of the health department. And the restaurant in question here did not have a satisfactory inspection grade like this place does. In fact, soon after this article came out, it ended up getting shut down, which means people eating that food could have gotten sick. And if people are buying food prepared in an unsafe, unlicensed restaurant, that just hurts legitimate businesses like this while making the streets of these neighborhoods much less safe.
We are victims of those criminals.
Crazy,
Fernando Mateo says President Trump is making bodegas safer by doing what the criminal justice system has failed to do.
Now, if you've committed a crime, I recommend, other than enter the country illegally, that you look for another place to work. Because if they come looking for you...
So this guy right here, he's the president of the United Bodega Workers of America, and every time something happens in New York that's controversial involving a bodega, he's there to stick up for these people. Every time they get robbed, every time they get raided, every time criminals enter their stores and assault workers. And he says the stores he represents are victims of crime committed by people who aren't supposed to be here. And that's the problem that sanctuary cities have. They're okay with criminal activity as long as it's federal, but they don't seem to understand that by allowing one type of crime crime, they expose themselves to other types as well. And residents of the Bronx and Washington Heights can attest to this. They're out there saying that their streets were dangerous, all because illegal activity allowed and empowered a criminal element to dig in its heels and take over. And empowering criminals hurts the law-abiding in ways that are less obvious but are very real for the people affected by them. And if jobs are being given away to people so businesses can break the law and save money, that's something we need to talk about, because it means that these businesses are taking job opportunities away from people who have to obtain them in a by-the-books manner.
Some bodega owners are looking to hire employees, in this case documented employees, because they need to keep moving the economy. In the Bronx, I'm Eliezer Marte.
So look at that. These businesses, now that their employees won't come to work, they've decided that they're going to obey the law and hire people who are on the books, which is going to be good news for people who need their first job and can't get it. And while the immigration activist crowd is out there protesting these raids as being cruel and unnecessary, these very same activists never protested businesses who exploited their workers at the expense of the law-abiding who they wouldn't hire. However, the open borders crowd is very upset about this, and they've got no intention of staying quiet about it, even though it benefits the very people trying to make it in America, immigrants, who they claim they're advocating for. So as a sanctuary city, New York is in a very strange place. Yes, these ICE raids are getting dangerous individuals, criminals, gang members off our streets. But you've got an entire group of people here who are very proud of New York's sanctuary city status, probably because they don't understand how much harm it's doing. But nonetheless, these are people who are very upset that any of this activity here is taking place, and they want it to stop.
Deportations undermine city families, they undermine city communities, and they undermine public safety. And so what our laws say is that the city is going to divorce itself from what it sees as misguided federal immigration enforcement efforts.
So this professor on the news describing this viewpoint of sanctuary city protections, maybe he holds it himself, maybe he doesn't, but the fact of the matter is, it's the working class neighborhoods that are experiencing most of the crime related to all of what we're talking about today. And none of the gang activity plaguing the Bronx or Washington Heights is present in places like Cobble Hill or the West Village. And these raids and crackdowns are something that people who live in these neighborhoods are very happy about. And while activists are out there talking about how terrible these raids are, none of the people who live in these neighborhoods are listening to them. And some of the people taken down in these raids are extremely dangerous. They've been caught trying to buy military-grade assault weapons. And this gang activity is certainly not a mystery to New York's leaders. They know that a lot of gang-related activity is taking place in shelters like the Randall's Island facility that is in the process of being shut down. You'll find wanted posters outside, and the city knows there are gang members living in these places, taking them over, co-opting them. But because this is a sanctuary city with a right to shelter, the city has plans right now to open a new 2,200-person shelter in the Bronx, while all of this immigration-related activity is taking place in that very same neighborhood.
Any of these immigrants that we speak about tonight have been properly screened.
Tough questions from Mayor Eric Adams' staff here at this contentious Bronx Community Board 1 meeting.
I'm living this. I'm seeing this.
Things got worse when the mayor's chief of staff revealed the decision to open a 2,200-bed.
So I can answer the first guy's question. It's a no. Nobody gets screened at all. The city's not doing background checks before it moves people into its shelters. That's how you've got gang members living down the hall in some cases from families with little kids. And since we're a sanctuary city with a right to shelter, that automatically means that nobody can be denied that right regardless of past or current criminal activity. That's how these dangerous gangs were able to make their way into these shelters in the first place. Nobody checked to see if they were thugs. And after this place opens, because this is a sanctuary city, the police will not be allowed inside it to keep it safe and make sure there aren't gang members operating openly with weapons. But by advocating for a halt to any immigration crackdowns in New York, these advocates fail to realize that they're advocating against protecting people who do have a valid reason to be here. Some of the asylum seekers in these shelters do have valid claims, but by allowing gang members and criminals to live next to them, everyone's in danger. And now things are so bad, criminal activity is spilling out of these shelters into our neighborhoods, with gang members committing crime all over town and exploiting people. On top of of that, New York does not have unlimited shelter space, which means that some of these facilities are housing gang members while people who could be legitimate asylum seekers are out sleeping in tents on the street somewhere.
A lot of fear, says this man from Ecuador. It's the kind of fear humanitarians are pushing back on, especially those who wish to protect the sanctuary sentiment.
We've been dealing with hysteria of mass deportation, of people feeling that any local law enforcement...
So this guy from Ecuador who partially showed his face on the news, is he here legally? Because if he is, he's got nothing to worry about. But if he thinks he's not here legally, he probably isn't, and he could be at risk for getting deported. But even though we've got advocates that are scaring people with this thought of mass deportations, when Trump took office, ICE only had around 6,000 agents who could even act in a deportation capacity. The resources simply are not there to deport millions of people from America. And even though ICE is now allowed to enter sensitive areas like schools, hospitals, churches, that's not what's happening. Federal agents are not camped up outside of an elementary school. Instead, the reason ghost towns are popping up in this city is because of targeted removals of people who are dangerous and also have orders of removal from this country and are here profiting at the expense of the law-abiding. What do you think about that? Are these raids in New York City having a positive effect on neighborhoods that were previously taken over by criminals? Are people...
That guy already said, the residents already think so. Like, come on, man. The people that live there don't want illegal immigrants there.
in the country unlawfully forced to subject themselves to the criminal underworld in some fashion to get by? And does that empower and embolden people who put all of us in danger? Let me know. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next video.
Anyway, that was pretty good, man. Who was that? Cash Jordan? I like how he edited it too with his phone. That was pretty cool. All right, let me see what's next. This one.